On a cold, rainy night, a scruffy puppy appeared outside St. Mary's Hospital. Night after night, he waited by the doors, his eyes fixed on the entrance. Who was he waiting for? This is the story of Max, a loyal dog who refused to give up, and Lily, the little girl who needed him most. It's a tale of love, loss, and the unbreakable bond between a child and her dog. A reminder that love knows no bounds, not even death. The cold autumn wind whipped through the empty streets, carrying with it the faint scent of rain. The city was quiet, save for the occasional hum of a passing car or the distant wail of an ambulance siren. St. Mary's Hospital stood as a beacon of light in the darkness, its windows glowing softly against the night sky. Inside, the hustle and bustle of the emergency room never ceased. Nurses hurried down hallways, doctors conferred in hushed tones, and patients waited anxiously for news of their loved ones. But outside, in the shadow of the hospital's towering walls, a small, scruffy puppy sat alone, his brown and white fur matted and dirty. No one knew where he had come from. One evening, he simply appeared, curled up on the cold pavement near the emergency entrance. The security guards on duty that night had tried to shoo him away, assuming he was just another stray. But the puppy didn't budge. He looked up at them with big, soulful eyes, his tail giving a feeble wag, as if to say, "I'm not leaving." The guards exchanged glances, shrugged, and let him be. After all, they had more pressing matters to attend to. The next night, the puppy was back, and the night after that. Rain or shine, he was always there, sitting patiently by the entrance, his eyes fixed on the sliding glass doors as if waiting for someone. The hospital staff began to notice him. Nurses on their smoke breaks would pause to offer him a kind word or a scratch behind the ears. One of the janitors, an older man named George, took pity on the little dog and started leaving out a bowl of water and scraps from the cafeteria. He even fashioned a makeshift bed out of an old blanket, tucking it into a corner where the puppy could rest. "Poor thing," George muttered one evening as he watched the puppy curl up on the blanket. "Wonder what his story is." The puppy didn't cause any trouble. He didn't bark or beg or try to sneak inside. He simply waited day after day, night after night, his presence becoming a quiet constant in the chaos of the hospital. Patients waiting for rides home would smile at him, some even stopping to pet him. Children, wide-eyed and curious, would ask their parents if they could take him home. But the puppy never left his spot. He seemed to be waiting for something or someone. Among the hospital staff, the puppy became a topic of conversation. Theories about his origins abounded. Some thought he had been abandoned by a homeless person who frequented the area. Others speculated that he had run away from an abusive home. A few even joked that he was a guardian angel in disguise, sent to watch over the hospital. But no one knew for sure. One nurse, Emily, who often worked the night shift, took a particular interest in the puppy. She noticed the worn collar around his neck and gently checked for a tag. It was scratched and dirty, but she could just make out the words, "Max, if found, please call Sarah." There was a phone number, but it was barely legible. "Max, huh?" Emily said softly, scratching the puppy behind the ears. "Who's Sarah? And why are you waiting here?" Max looked up at her with those big, soulful eyes, as if trying to tell her something. But of course, he couldn't speak. Emily sighed and made a mental note to ask around and see if anyone knew anything about the puppy or his owner. But days turned into weeks, and no one came forward to claim him. As time passed, Max became a fixture at the hospital. The staff grew fond of him, and he became a source of comfort for many. Patients waiting for test results would sit with him, finding solace in his quiet presence. Children undergoing treatment would light up when they saw him, their faces breaking into smiles despite their pain. Even the doctors, usually too busy to notice much outside their work, would pause to pat him on the head as they rushed by. But despite the warmth and care he received, Max never strayed far from the hospital entrance. He seemed to be waiting for something, or someone. His eyes would often drift to the sliding glass doors, as if expecting them to open and reveal the person he was waiting for. The staff couldn't help but wonder, who is he waiting for? And will they ever come? One night, as the rain poured down in sheets, Max sat huddled under the awning, his fur soaked and matted. A young boy, no more than 8 years old, was wheeled out of the emergency room by his parents. The boy had been in a car accident and had just been discharged after a long and harrowing night. His face was pale, his arm in a cast. But when he saw Max, his eyes lit up. "Can I pet him?" the boy asked weakly. His parents nodded, and the nurse pushing the wheelchair stopped so the boy could reach out to Max. The puppy, sensing the boy's pain, gently nuzzled his hand, his tail wagging softly. The boy smiled, a small but genuine smile, and for a moment, the weight of the night seemed to lift. "Thank you," the boy whispered to Max before his parents wheeled him away. Max watched them go, his eyes lingering on the boy for a moment before turning back to the hospital doors. The rain continued to fall, but Max didn't move. He sat there, a silent guardian, waiting patiently for the person he longed to see. The hospital was unusually quiet that evening, the kind of quiet that made the hum of the fluorescent lights seem louder than usual. Dr. Michael Carter sat in his office, staring at the phone on his desk. The worn collar with Sarah's name and the faded phone number lay beside it, a silent reminder of the mystery he was determined to solve. He had tried calling the number multiple times, but it was always the same, a robotic voice informing him that the number was no longer in service. Frustrated but undeterred, he had turned to social media, posting about Max and asking for any information about Sarah. So far, there had been no leads, but tonight something felt different. Maybe it was the way Max had looked at him earlier, his big, soulful eyes filled with a quiet desperation. Or maybe it was the conversation he'd had with Emily, the nurse who had mentioned Sarah's name. Whatever it was, Dr. Carter couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the verge of uncovering something important. He picked up the phone and dialed the number again, half expecting the same result. But this time, after a few rings, a woman's voice answered. "Hello?" Dr. Carter's heart skipped a beat. "Hi, my name is Dr. Michael Carter. I'm calling from St. Mary's Hospital. I'm trying to reach Sarah Mitchell. Is this her number?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a moment Dr. Carter thought the call had been disconnected. Then the woman spoke again, her voice trembling. "This is Emily. Sarah was my best friend. She passed away 3 months ago." Dr. Carter felt a lump form in his throat. "I'm so sorry for your loss," he said softly. "I didn't know." Emily took a deep breath, her voice choked with emotion. "It's okay. It's still hard to talk about. What's this about?" Dr. Carter hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. "I think I have something, or rather someone, who belongs to Sarah's family, a puppy named Max. He's been waiting outside the hospital for weeks, and I found a collar with Sarah's name and this number on it." There was another pause, and then Emily let out a soft sob. "Max, he's alive?" "Yes," Dr. Carter said, his voice gentle. "He's been here the whole time. I've been trying to figure out how to help him, but I didn't know about Sarah until now. Can you tell me what happened?" Emily took another deep breath, trying to steady herself. "Sarah and Max were inseparable. He was her shadow, always by her side. She adopted him from a shelter when he was just a puppy, and they've been together ever since. He adored her, and he loved Lily, Sarah's daughter, just as much." "Lily?" Dr. Carter asked, his heart aching at the mention of a child. "Yes," Emily said, her voice breaking. "Lily is only 7. She's been through so much. Sarah was a single mom, and she did everything for that little girl. They were a team, the 3 of them, Sarah, Lily, and Max." Dr. Carter listened in silence, his mind racing. "What happened to Sarah?" he asked finally. Emily's voice was barely above a whisper. "It was a car accident. 3 months ago, Sarah was driving Lily to school, and Max was in the back seat. A truck ran a red light and hit them. Sarah, she didn't make it. Lily was hurt, but she survived. Max was thrown from the car, but he wasn't seriously injured. He must have followed the ambulance to the hospital." Dr. Carter's heart ached as he imagined the scene. Max, scared and confused, running after the ambulance, determined to stay close to Sarah. "And Lily?" he asked. "Where is she now?" "She's living with her grandparents," Emily said. "They've been trying to take care of her, but it's been hard. They're grieving too. And Lily, she's been heartbroken without her mom. And without Max. Dr. Carter felt a surge of determination. We need to reunite Max with Lily. He's been waiting for Sarah all this time, but she's not coming back. He needs to be with Lily. Emily's voice was filled with gratitude. Thank you, Dr. Carter. Thank you for caring about Max. Sarah would have been so grateful. It's the least I can do, Dr. Carter said. Do you know how I can get in touch with Lily's grandparents? Emily hesitated. I don't have their number, but I know where they live. It's a small town about 2 hours away. I can give you the address. Dr. Carter grabbed a pen and paper, jotting down the information as Emily spoke. Thank you, Emily. I'll do everything I can to make this right. After hanging up the phone, Dr. Carter sat back in his chair, his mind racing. He thought about Max, sitting outside the hospital night after night waiting for Sarah. He thought about Lily, a little girl who had lost her mother and her best friend in one tragic moment. And he thought about Sarah, a woman who had loved her daughter and her dogs so much that even in death, their bond remained unbroken. The next morning, Dr. Carter packed a small bag and loaded Max into his car. The puppy seemed confused but excited, wagging his tail as he sniffed the unfamiliar surroundings. Dr. Carter had debated whether to bring Max along, but in the end, he decided it was the right thing to do. If this was indeed Sarah's family, Max deserved to be there. The drive was quiet, the hum of the engine and the occasional whine from Max the only sounds. Dr. Carter's mind raced with possibilities. What if Sarah's parents didn't want anything to do with Max? What if they had moved and he couldn't find them? He pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the road ahead. When they finally arrived in the small town, Dr. Carter followed the GPS to the address Emily had given him. It was a modest house with a well-kept garden and a white picket fence. He parked the car and took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. Max sat up in the passenger seat, his ears perked as if sensing something important was about to happen. Dr. Carter got out of the car and walked up to the front door, Max trotting beside him. He rang the doorbell and waited, his stomach in knots. A few moments later, the door opened, and an elderly woman with kind eyes and silver hair peered out. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice warm but cautious. "Hi, my name is Dr. Michael Carter," he said, extending his hand. "I'm from St. Mary's Hospital. I'm looking for the family of Sarah Mitchell. Are you her mother?" The woman's eyes widened and she nodded slowly. "Yes, I'm Margaret. Sarah was my daughter. What's this about?" Dr. Carter took a deep breath. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I think I have something, or rather someone, who belongs to your family." He stepped aside, revealing Max, who was sitting patiently at his feet. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth, and tears filled her eyes. "Max," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Is that really you?" Max's tail began to wag furiously, and he let out a soft whine. Margaret knelt down, tears streaming down her face as she reached out to him. "Oh, Max, we've missed you so much," she said, pulling him into a tight hug. Max nuzzled her, his tail wagging so hard it seemed like it might fall off. Dr. Carter felt a lump form in his throat as he watched the emotional reunion. He had been so focused on finding Sarah's family that he hadn't stopped to think about what it would mean for Max. But seeing the joy on Margaret's face, he knew he had done the right thing. Margaret stood up, wiping her tears. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "We've been looking for Max ever since the accident. We thought we'd lost him forever." Dr. Carter smiled. "He's been waiting outside the hospital all this time. I think he was hoping Sarah would come back." Margaret nodded, her eyes filling with tears again. Sarah loved him so much. He was her shadow, always by her side. And Lily, she's been heartbroken without him. As if on cue, a young girl's voice called from inside the house. "Grandma, who's at the door?" Margaret turned and called back, "Lily, come here. There's someone I want you to see." A moment later, a little girl with curly brown hair and big, curious eyes appeared in the doorway. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. When she saw Max, her eyes widened, and she let out a gasp. "Max!" she cried, dropping to her knees and throwing her arms around him. Max barked happily, licking her face as she laughed and cried at the same time. Dr. Carter watched the scene unfold, his heart swelling with emotion. He had never seen anything so pure, so full of love and joy. In that moment, all the sleepless nights and endless searching felt worth it. Margaret turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said again. "You've brought our family back together." Dr. Carter smiled. "I'm just glad I could help. Max is a special dog. He deserves to be with the people who love him." As he drove back to the city that evening, Dr. Carter couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. Max was where he belonged, and Dr. Carter had played a small part in making that happen. But as he glanced at the empty passenger seat, he realized something else. He was going to miss the little dog who had somehow found his way into his heart. The drive back to the city was quiet, the hum of the car's engine the only sound breaking the stillness. Dr. Michael Carter gripped the steering wheel tightly, his mind replaying the emotional reunion he had just witnessed. Max, the scruffy little puppy who had waited outside the hospital for weeks, was now safe and sound with Lily and her grandparents. The image of Lily's tear-streaked face as she hugged Max, her laughter mingling with her sobs, was etched into Dr. Carter's memory. It was a moment of pure joy, a rare glimmer of light in what had been a dark and painful time for the little girl. But as much as Dr. Carter wanted to feel relief, a heaviness settled in his chest. The story of Sarah's tragic death, Max's unwavering loyalty, and Lily's heartbreak had left him emotionally drained. He had seen his fair share of pain and loss in his years as a pediatrician, but something about this story struck him differently. Maybe it was the way Max had looked at him with those soulful eyes, as if silently pleading for help. Or maybe it was the thought of a little girl losing her mother and her best friend in one devastating moment. Whatever it was, it had shaken him to his core. When Dr. Carter finally pulled into the hospital parking lot, he sat in his car for a long time, staring at the empty passenger seat where Max had been just hours before. The car felt too quiet without the puppy's occasional whines or the soft thump of his tail against the seat. Dr. Carter took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, but the weight of everything he had learned and witnessed came crashing down on him. Tears welled up in his eyes, and before he could stop himself, he was crying. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. He hadn't cried like this in years, not since he was a young doctor, fresh out of medical school, and had lost his first patient. That had been a turning point for him, a moment that had forced him to confront the harsh realities of his profession. But this was different. This wasn't about medicine or his ability to save lives. This was about love, loss, and the unbreakable bond between a mother, her daughter, and a loyal little dog. When the tears finally subsided, Dr. Carter wiped his face with the back of his hand and took a few deep breaths. He knew he couldn't sit in his car all night. There were patients who needed him, and he had a job to do. But as he stepped out of the car and walked toward the hospital, he couldn't shake the feeling that he needed to do something more, not just for Max and Lily, but for everyone who had been touched by their story. The hospital was quiet when Dr. Carter walked in, the night shift in full swing. He made his way to the break room, where a few nurses and orderlies were sitting, sipping coffee and chatting quietly. They looked up when he entered, their expressions shifting to concern when they saw his red-rimmed eyes. "Dr. Carter, are you okay?" one of the nurses, Emily, asked. She was the same nurse who had first pointed out Max to him, and she had been following the story closely. Dr. Carter nodded, though his voice was shaky. "I'm fine. I need to tell you all something." The room fell silent as everyone turned their attention to him. Dr. Carter took a deep breath and began to recount everything he had learned about Max, Sarah, and Lily. He told them about the phone call with Emily, Sarah's best friend, and the heartbreaking story of the car accident that had taken Sarah's life. He described Max's unwavering loyalty, how the little dog had followed the ambulance to the hospital and waited outside for weeks, hoping Sarah would return. And he shared the emotional reunion between Max and Lily, the little girl who had lost so much but had found a piece of her mother in the scruffy little puppy. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Emily was openly crying, and even George, the usually stoic janitor, had tears streaming down his face. "That poor little girl," Emily said, her voice trembling. "And Max, he's been waiting all this time, not knowing what happened to Sarah." Dr. Carter nodded, his own eyes filling with tears again. I know. It's, it's a lot to process, but I think we can do something to help. Not just for Max and Lily, but for everyone who's been touched by their story. The room was silent for a moment as everyone absorbed his words. Then George spoke up, his voice gruff but filled with emotion. What do you have in mind, Doc? Dr. Carter took a deep breath. I think we should create a memorial for Sarah, something to honor her memory and the love she had for Lily and Max. And maybe we can use Max's story to help others, to remind people that even in the darkest times, there's still hope and love. The idea was met with unanimous approval. The staff quickly began brainstorming ways to make it happen. Emily suggested creating a small garden in Sarah's memory, complete with a plaque and a bench where people could sit and reflect. George offered to build a doghouse for Max, so he would always have a safe place to sleep. Others talked about organizing a fundraiser to help Lily and her grandparents with medical expenses and other costs. As the conversation continued, Dr. Carter felt a sense of hope begin to replace the heaviness in his chest. He had been so focused on the pain and loss that he had almost forgotten about the power of community and the difference they could make when they came together. Over the next few days, the hospital staff worked tirelessly to bring their plans to life. The garden was created in a quiet corner of the hospital grounds, a peaceful oasis filled with flowers and greenery. A plaque was placed at the entrance featuring a picture of Sarah, Lily, and Max with the words, "Love knows no bounds, not even death." A bench was installed nearby, offering a place for patients, staff, and visitors to sit and reflect. The fundraiser was a huge success, with donations pouring in from the community. People were moved by Max's story and wanted to help in any way they could. The money raised was used to cover Lily's medical expenses and to create a trust fund for her future education. As for Max, he became a regular visitor at the hospital. Lily and her grandparents brought him by often, and he quickly became a favorite among the patients and staff. Children in the pediatric ward would light up when they saw him, their faces breaking into smiles despite their pain. Even the doctors and nurses found comfort in his presence, a reminder of the love and loyalty that had brought them all together. Dr. Carter often visited the garden, sitting on the bench and reflecting on everything that had happened. He thought about Sarah, a woman he had never met but whose love for her daughter and her dog had touched so many lives. He thought about Lily, a little girl who had faced unimaginable loss but had found hope and healing in the love of a scruffy little puppy. And he thought about Max, the loyal little dog who had waited so patiently, never giving up hope. As he sat there, Dr. Carter felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had done everything he could to help Max and Lily, and in doing so, he had found a renewed sense of purpose. The tears he had shed were not just tears of sadness, but also tears of gratitude, for the love that had brought them all together and for the hope that had emerged from the darkness. The small house on the edge of town was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt heavy and suffocating. Lily sat on the floor of her room, her knees pulled up to her chest, staring at the framed photo of her mother on the nightstand. It was one of her favorite pictures. Sarah was smiling, her arms wrapped around Lily, with Max sitting at their feet, his tail a blur of motion. Lily traced the edge of the frame with her finger, her throat tightening as tears welled up in her eyes. It had been 3 months since the accident, but it still didn't feel real. How could her mom just be gone? How could everything change so suddenly? One minute they were driving to school, singing along to the radio, and the next there was a loud crash, and everything went black. When Lily woke up in the hospital, her grandparents were there, their faces pale and drawn. They told her what had happened, but the words didn't make sense. How could her mom be gone? How could Max be missing? Lily's grandparents had done their best to comfort her, but they were grieving too. Her grandmother, Margaret, would often sit with her, holding her close and stroking her hair, but there was a sadness in her eyes that Lily couldn't ignore. Her grandfather, Thomas, tried to keep things normal, making her favorite meals and taking her to the park. But he was quieter than usual, his laughter rare and forced. And then there was Max. Lily missed him so much it hurt. He had been her best friend, her constant companion. He was there when she woke up in the morning, wagging his tail and licking her face until she laughed. He was there when she came home from school, waiting by the door with his favorite toy in his mouth. And he was there at night, curled up at the foot of her bed, his soft snores lulling her to sleep. But now he was gone, just like her mom. Lily had asked her grandparents about him countless times, but they didn't know where he was. "We'll find him, sweetheart," her grandmother would say. But the words felt empty. Lily could see the worry in her eyes, the way she exchanged glances with her grandfather when they thought Lily wasn't looking. Lily didn't understand why they couldn't find Max. He was smart. He would have found his way home if he could. Unless something had happened to him too. The thought made her stomach twist, and she buried her face in her knees, trying to push it away. Meanwhile, at St. Mary's Hospital, Max continued to wait outside the emergency entrance, his eyes fixed on the sliding glass doors. The staff had grown used to his presence, and many of them had developed a soft spot for the scruffy little dog. They left food and water for him, and George the janitor had even made him a cozy bed out of an old blanket. But despite the care he received, Max never strayed far from his spot. He seemed to be waiting for something, or someone. His eyes would often drift to the doors, as if expecting them to open and reveal the person he was waiting for. The staff couldn't help but wonder, who is he waiting for, and will they ever come? Dr. Carter had been keeping a close eye on Max, his heart aching for the little dog. He had tried calling the number on Max's collar, but it was no longer in service. He had posted about Max on social media, but so far there had been no leads. He didn't know what else to do, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Max's story. One evening, as Dr. Carter was leaving the hospital, he noticed Max sitting in his usual spot, his eyes fixed on the doors. The puppy looked up as Dr. Carter approached, his tail giving a feeble wag. "Hey there, buddy," Dr. Carter said softly, crouching down beside him. "Still waiting, huh?" Max nuzzled his hand, his eyes filled with a quiet desperation. Dr. Carter sighed, scratching the puppy behind the ears. "I don't know who you're waiting for, but I'm going to do everything I can to help you." Back at the house, Lily's grief was becoming harder to bear. She had always been a bright, cheerful child, but now she felt like a shadow of herself. She didn't want to play or draw or do any of the things she used to love. All she wanted was her mom and Max. One night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she heard a soft knock on her door. "Come in," she whispered. The door creaked open, and her grandmother stepped inside, carrying a tray with a mug of hot chocolate and a plate of cookies. "I thought you might like a little snack," she said, setting the tray on the nightstand. Lily sat up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "Thanks, Grandma." Margaret sat down on the edge of the bed, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" Lily shrugged, her eyes filling with tears. "I miss Mom, and I miss Max. I just want them to come back." Margaret's eyes filled with tears too, and she pulled Lily into a tight hug. "I know, sweetheart. I miss them too. But your mom loved you so much, and she would want you to be happy. And we're going to find Max." "I promise." Lily buried her face in her grandmother's shoulder, her tears soaking into the fabric of her shirt. "What if we never find him? What if something bad happened to him?" Margaret held her tighter, her voice trembling. "We're not going to give up, Lily. We're going to keep looking until we find him. And when we do, we'll bring him home, where he belongs." The next morning, Lily woke up with a sense of determination. She didn't know how, but she was going to find Max. She couldn't just sit around and wait anymore. She had to do something. After breakfast, she went to her room and pulled out a piece of paper and a box of crayons. She drew a picture of Max, his scruffy brown and white fur, and his big, soulful eyes. Underneath, she wrote, "Missing Max. If found, please call." She added her grandparents' phone number and her name, then carefully folded the paper and put it in her pocket. "Grandma, can we go to the park?" she asked, trying to sound casual. Margaret looked up from the dishes, her expression softening. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's get ready." At the park, Lily made sure to stop at every bulletin board, tacking up her flyer and hoping someone would see it and call. She didn't know if it would work, but she had to try. She couldn't give up on Max, not when he had always been there for her. As she stood back and looked at the flyer, she felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone would see it and help bring Max home. The morning sun filtered through the curtains of the small house on the edge of town, casting a warm glow over the living room. Lily sat on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her, staring out the window. Her grandparents were in the kitchen, talking in hushed tones, but Lily wasn't paying attention. Her mind was elsewhere, lost in thoughts of her mom and Max. It had been weeks since she'd put up the flyers, but there had been no calls, no leads. She was starting to lose hope. Meanwhile, at St. Mary's Hospital, Dr. Michael Carter was preparing for what he hoped would be a life-changing moment. After weeks of searching, he had finally managed to track down Sarah's parents. The phone call had been emotional, with Sarah's mother, Margaret, breaking down in tears when Dr. Carter told her about Max. She had explained how much Max meant to Lily and how heartbroken she had been since the accident. Dr. Carter had promised to bring Max to them, and now, with the puppy sitting patiently in the passenger seat of his car, he was on his way to reunite Max with his family. The drive to the small town was quiet, the hum of the car's engine the only sound breaking the stillness. Max sat upright, his ears perked as if he sensed something important was about to happen. Dr. Carter glanced at him, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You're going home, buddy," he said softly. "Just hang in there a little longer." When they finally arrived at the house, Dr. Carter parked the car and took a deep breath. He got out and opened the passenger door, clipping a leash onto Max's collar. The puppy hopped out, his tail wagging furiously as he sniffed the unfamiliar surroundings. Dr. Carter walked up to the front door, his heart pounding in his chest. He rang the doorbell and waited, Max sitting patiently at his feet. A moment later, the door opened, and Margaret stood there, her eyes widening as she saw Max. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "Max?" Max's tail wagged even harder, and he let out a soft whine, his entire body trembling with excitement. Margaret knelt down, tears streaming down her face as she reached out to him. "Oh, Max, we've missed you so much," she said, pulling him into a tight hug. Max nuzzled her, his tail wagging so hard it seemed like it might fall off. Dr. Carter felt a lump form in his throat as he watched the emotional reunion. He had been so focused on finding Sarah's family that he hadn't stopped to think about what it would mean for Max. But seeing the joy on Margaret's face, he knew he had done the right thing. Margaret stood up, wiping her tears. "Thank you," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "We've been looking for Max ever since the accident. We thought we'd lost him forever." Dr. Carter smiled. "He's been waiting outside the hospital all this time. I think he was hoping Sarah would come back." Margaret nodded, her eyes filling with tears again. Sarah loved him so much. He was her shadow, always by her side. And Lily, she's been heartbroken without him. As if on cue, a young girl's voice called from inside the house. "Grandma, who's at the door?" Margaret turned and called back, "Lily, come here. There's someone I want you to see." A moment later, Lily appeared in the doorway, her curly brown hair tied back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing her favorite pajamas, the ones with the little stars on them, and her eyes were wide with curiosity. When she saw Max, her breath caught in her throat, and she froze, her eyes filling with tears. "Max," she whispered, her voice trembling. Max's tail wagged furiously, and he let out a happy bark, pulling against the leash as he tried to get to her. Dr. Carter quickly unclipped the leash, and Max bounded toward Lily, his entire body wiggling with joy. Lily dropped to her knees, throwing her arms around him as he licked her face, his tail wagging so hard it was a blur. "Max! Oh, Max, I missed you so much!" Lily cried, burying her face in his fur. Tears streamed down her face, but for the first time in months, they were tears of joy. Max nuzzled her, his whine soft and happy, as if he was trying to tell her how much he had missed her too. Dr. Carter watched the scene unfold, his heart swelling with emotion. He had never seen anything so pure, so full of love and joy. In that moment, all the sleepless nights and endless searching felt worth it. Margaret turned to him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said again. "You've brought our family back together." Dr. Carter smiled. "I'm just glad I could help. Max is a special dog. He deserves to be with the people who love him. Lily looked up, her tear-streaked face breaking into a smile. Thank you, Doctor. Carter, she said, her voice soft but filled with emotion. Thank you for bringing Max back to me. Dr. Carter crouched down, his eyes meeting hers. You're welcome, Lily. I'm just glad I could help. Max has been waiting for you, just like you've been waiting for him. Lily hugged Max tighter, her smile widening. I'm never letting him go again. As the days passed, Max settled into his new life with Lily and her grandparents. He followed her everywhere, his tail wagging furiously as he watched her with adoring eyes. Lily, in turn, seemed to come alive again. She laughed more, her smiles brighter and more frequent. She still missed her mom, but having Max back gave her a sense of comfort and hope. Dr. Carter visited often, bringing treats for Max and checking in on Lily and her grandparents. He had become a part of their lives, a reminder of the kindness and compassion that had brought them all together. And as he watched Lily and Max play in the backyard, their laughter filling the air, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. The reunion had brought a glimmer of joy to the grieving family, a reminder that even in the darkest times, there was still hope and love. And for Dr. Carter, it was a reminder of why he had become a doctor in the first place, to help people, to make a difference, and to bring light to the darkest moments. The days that followed Max's return were filled with a mix of joy and adjustment. For Lily, having Max back was like finding a missing piece of herself. The scruffy little puppy who had been her constant companion before the accident was now by her side again, his presence a soothing balm to her grief. For Max, being with Lily felt like coming home, but there were moments when he would pause, his ears perking up as if he heard something in the distance, and his eyes would drift to the window, staring out at the stars as if waiting for someone who would never return. The house, once quiet and heavy with sorrow, began to feel alive again. Max's energy was infectious, his playful antics bringing laughter and light to every room. He would chase his tail in circles, his barks echoing through the house, or bring Lily his favorite toy, dropping it at her feet and wagging his tail furiously until she threw it for him. Lily's grandparents, Margaret and Thomas, watched with grateful smiles as their granddaughter's laughter filled the air, a sound they hadn't heard in far too long. But even as Max brought joy to the household, there were moments when his behavior hinted at the loss he, too, had endured. In the evenings after the house had quieted down, Max would often wander to the living room window and sit there, his nose pressed against the glass, staring out at the night sky. His tail would stop wagging, and his ears would droop slightly, as if he were lost in thought. Lily noticed this and would sit beside him, her small hand resting on his back. "Do you miss her too, Max?" she would whisper, her voice soft and trembling. Max would turn to her, his big, soulful eyes meeting hers, and let out a soft whine before nuzzling her hand. It was as if he understood her words, as if he, too, carried the weight of Sarah's absence. Lily's grandparents did their best to create a sense of normalcy for her. Margaret would wake up early to make Lily's favorite breakfast, pancakes with a drizzle of maple syrup, while Thomas would take her to the park in the afternoons, Max trotting happily beside them. The park had always been one of Lily's favorite places, and now with Max by her side, it felt like a sanctuary. She would run through the grass, Max chasing after her, his barks of excitement filling the air. For those brief moments, it was easy to forget the pain that had shadowed their lives. But grief has a way of resurfacing when you least expect it. One evening, as Lily was getting ready for bed, she found herself staring at the framed photo of her mom on the nightstand. It was the same photo she had looked at countless times before. Sarah smiling, her arms wrapped around Lily, with Max sitting at their feet. But this time, something about the photo made her chest tighten, and before she knew it, tears were streaming down her face. Max, who had been lying on the floor beside her bed, immediately sat up, his ears perking at the sound of her quiet sobs. He padded over to her, his tail wagging gently, and rested his head on her lap. Lily buried her face in his fur, her tears soaking into his scruffy coat. "I miss her so much, Max," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I wish she could be here with us." Max let out a soft whine, nuzzling her hand as if to comfort her. He stayed by her side until her tears subsided, his presence a silent reminder that she wasn't alone. For Max, adjusting to his new life wasn't without its challenges. Though he was overjoyed to be with Lily, there were moments when he seemed to forget where he was. He would wander through the house, sniffing corners and pawing at doors, as if searching for something or someone. Margaret noticed this and would gently call him back, her heart aching for the little dog who had lost so much. One night, as the family sat in the living room watching a movie, Max suddenly jumped up from his spot beside Lily and ran to the front door, barking excitedly. Lily paused the movie, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What's wrong, Max?" she asked, getting up to follow him. Max was scratching at the door, his tail wagging furiously, as if he expected someone to walk in at any moment. Lily's grandparents exchanged a glance, their expressions filled with sadness. "He's waiting for her," Margaret said softly, her voice trembling. "He thinks Sarah's going to come home." Lily's heart ached as she knelt beside Max, wrapping her arms around him. "She's not coming back, Max," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But I'm here. I'm here. And I love you so much." Max turned to her, his eyes filled with a quiet understanding, and licked her face. It was as if he knew, in that moment, that Sarah was gone. But he wasn't alone. He had Lily, and she had him. As the weeks turned into months, Max and Lily's bond grew stronger. They became inseparable, their connection a testament to the power of love and loyalty. Max would follow Lily everywhere, his tail wagging furiously as he watched her, with adoring eyes. He would sit beside her while she did her homework, his head resting on her lap, or curl up at the foot of her bed at night, his soft snores lulling her to sleep. Lily, in turn, found comfort in Max's presence. He was a constant reminder of her mom, a living link to the life they had shared. She would often tell him stories about Sarah, her voice soft and filled with love. "Remember when Mom used to take us to the beach, Max?" she would say, her eyes shining with tears. "You loved chasing the seagulls, and Mom would laugh so hard she'd cry." Max would listen intently, his tail thumping softly against the floor, as if he understood every word. And in those moments, it felt like Sarah was still with them, her love and laughter echoing through the house. Dr. Carter visited often, bringing treats for Max and checking in on Lily and her grandparents. He had become a part of their lives, a reminder of the kindness and compassion that had brought them all together. And as he watched Lily and Max play in the backyard, their laughter filling the air, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Grief never is. But with Max by her side, Lily had found a way to keep moving forward. And Max, though he would always carry the memory of Sarah in his heart, had found a new purpose: to love and protect the little girl who needed him most. The story of Max and Lily spread like wildfire through the community, a tale of love, loss, and unwavering loyalty that touched the hearts of everyone who heard it. It began with a small article in the local newspaper, written by a reporter who had heard about Max's incredible journey from a nurse at St. Mary's Hospital. The article detailed how Max had waited outside the hospital for weeks, hoping for Sarah's return, and how Dr. Carter had worked tirelessly to reunite him with Lily. It spoke of Sarah's love for her daughter and her dog, and how that love had brought a community together. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Letters and emails poured in from people who had been moved by the story, many of them sharing their own experiences of loss and healing. Donations began to arrive at the hospital, earmarked for a memorial garden in Sarah's honor. The hospital staff, inspired by the outpouring of support, quickly got to work planning the garden, determined to create a space that would reflect Sarah's spirit and the love she had for Lily and Max. The garden was designed to be a place of peace and reflection, a sanctuary for patients, staff, and visitors alike. It was located in a quiet corner of the hospital grounds, surrounded by tall trees and flowering shrubs. A winding path led through the garden, lined with benches where people could sit and rest. At the center of the garden was a small pond, its surface dotted with lily pads and surrounded by colorful flowers. A plaque was placed at the entrance, featuring a picture of Sarah, Lily, and Max with the words, "Love knows no bounds, not even death." The dedication ceremony was held on a sunny afternoon, with members of the community, hospital staff, and local officials in attendance. Lily and her grandparents were there too, standing beside Dr. Carter as he addressed the crowd. Max sat at Lily's feet, his tail wagging gently as he looked around at the sea of faces. "This garden is more than just a memorial," Dr. Carter said, his voice filled with emotion. "It's a testament to the power of love and the strength of the human spirit. Sarah Mitchell was a remarkable woman, a loving mother, and a devoted friend. Her love for her daughter, Lily, and her dog, Max, was boundless, and it's that love that has brought us all together today." He turned to Lily, who was clutching Max's leash tightly, her eyes shining with tears. "Lily, your mom would be so proud of you. And Max, well, he's a reminder that love never really leaves us. It's always there, in the people, and the pets we hold dear." The crowd erupted into applause, and Lily felt a surge of pride and gratitude. She looked down at Max, who was gazing up at her with his big soulful eyes, and smiled. "We did it, Max," she whispered. "We made something beautiful for Mom." In the weeks that followed, the garden became a beloved part of the hospital. Patients would visit to find solace and peace, their spirits lifted by the beauty of the space. Staff members would take their breaks there, sitting on the benches and enjoying the tranquility. And Lily and Max became regular visitors, their presence a reminder of the love and hope that had inspired the garden's creation. One afternoon, as Lily and Max walked through the garden, they noticed a young boy sitting on one of the benches, his head bowed. He looked to be about Lily's age, and there was a sadness in his eyes that she recognized all too well. Max, ever perceptive, trotted over to the boy and nuzzled his hand, his tail wagging gently. The boy looked up, startled, and then smiled as he reached out to pet Max. "Hey there, buddy," he said softly. "What's your name?" "That's Max," Lily said, walking over to join them. "And I'm Lily." The boy introduced himself as Jake, and as they talked, Lily learned that he was at the hospital because his little sister was sick. "It's really hard," Jake admitted, his voice trembling. "I don't know what to do." Lily sat down beside him, her heart aching for the boy who reminded her so much of herself. "I know how you feel," she said softly. "I lost my mom a few months ago. It's really hard, but having Max helps. He's always there for me, no matter what." Jake looked at Max, who was now lying at their feet, his head resting on his paws. "He's a good dog," Jake said, his voice filled with admiration. "The best," Lily agreed. "And you know what? You're not alone. There are people who care about you, just like Max cares about me. You just have to let them in." Jake nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Thanks, Lily. That means a lot." The garden also became a place of healing for Lily and her grandparents. They would often visit together, sitting on the benches and sharing stories about Sarah. Margaret would talk about the day Sarah was born, her voice filled with love and pride, while Thomas would recount funny stories from Sarah's childhood, his laughter echoing through the garden. Lily would listen intently, her heart swelling with love for her mom and gratitude for the family she still had. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the garden, Lily sat on a bench with Max by her side. She looked up at the plaque, her eyes tracing the words, "Love knows no bounds, not even death." She thought about her mom, about all the love and laughter they had shared, and about the legacy she had left behind. "I miss you, Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I'm going to be okay. Max is here, and Grandma and Grandpa are here, and I know you're watching over us. I love you so much." Max nuzzled her hand, his tail wagging gently, as if to remind her that she wasn't alone. And in that moment, surrounded by the beauty of the garden and the love of her family, Lily felt a sense of peace settle over her. The story of Max and Lily continued to inspire the community, a reminder of the power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. Donations to the hospital increased, funding new programs and services for patients and their families. And the garden, with its plaque honoring Sarah, became a symbol of hope and healing for everyone who visited. For Lily, the garden was more than just a memorial. It was a place where she could feel close to her mom, a place where she could find comfort and strength. And for Max, it was a reminder of the love that had brought him home, a love that would never fade. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the garden continued to bloom, its flowers a vibrant testament to the love that had inspired its creation. And in the hearts of everyone who visited, the story of Max and Lily lived on, a reminder that love truly knows no bounds, not even death. The Memorial Garden had become a sanctuary for Dr. Michael Carter. After long shifts at the hospital, he would often find himself drawn to the quiet corner of the grounds, where the scent of blooming flowers and the gentle rustle of leaves provided a welcome respite from the chaos of the emergency room. The garden, with its winding paths and serene pond, was a place of peace and reflection, a reminder of the love and resilience that had inspired its creation. As Dr. Carter walked through the garden one evening, his footsteps soft against the gravel path, he paused at the plaque near the entrance. The words etched into the metal seemed to glow in the fading light. Love knows no bounds, not even death. Beneath the words was a picture of Sarah, Lily, and Max, their smiles frozen in time. Dr. Carter's eyes lingered on the image, his heart heavy with a mix of emotions: grief for Sarah's loss, gratitude for the love she had left behind, and admiration for the little dog who had become a symbol of hope. He sat down on a nearby bench, his gaze drifting to the pond at the center of the garden. The water was still, its surface reflecting the soft hues of the evening sky. Max's story had touched him in ways he hadn't expected, teaching him lessons that went far beyond the walls of the hospital. The little dog's unwavering loyalty, his resilience in the face of loss, and his capacity for love had left an indelible mark on Dr. Carter's heart. Dr. Carter had always been a compassionate doctor, dedicated to his patients and their families. But Max's story had deepened his understanding of what it meant to truly care for someone. It wasn't just about treating illnesses or performing surgeries. It was about being present, about offering comfort and hope in the darkest moments. Max had done that for Lily, and in doing so, he had shown Dr. Carter the power of unconditional love. As he sat there, lost in thought, Dr. Carter remembered the first time he had seen Max outside the hospital. The scruffy little dog had been sitting by the emergency entrance, his eyes fixed on the sliding glass doors, as if waiting for someone who would never return. At the time, Dr. Carter had been intrigued by the puppy's loyalty, but he hadn't fully understood the depth of his devotion. Now, as he reflected on everything that had happened, he realized that Max's story was a testament to the resilience of the human and canine spirit. "You've taught me so much, Max," Dr. Carter murmured, his voice soft in the quiet of the garden. "About love, about loyalty, about never giving up, even when the odds are against you." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves overhead, and Dr. Carter closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. He thought about Lily, about the strength she had shown in the face of unimaginable loss, and about the bond she shared with Max. It was a bond that had brought light to her darkest days, a reminder that love could endure even in the face of death. The lessons Dr. Carter had learned from Max began to shape his work in profound ways. He found himself spending more time with his patients, listening to their stories and offering words of comfort. He became more attuned to the emotional needs of the children in the pediatric ward, recognizing that healing wasn't just about physical recovery. It was about finding hope and joy in the midst of pain. One afternoon, as Dr. Carter made his rounds, he stopped by the room of a young boy named Ethan, who had been admitted for a serious illness. Ethan was sitting up in bed, his face pale but his eyes bright with curiosity. On the bedside table was a framed photo of a golden retriever, its tail wagging furiously. "Is that your dog?" Dr. Carter asked, nodding toward the photo. Ethan's face lit up. "Yeah, that's Buddy. He's the best dog ever. I miss him so much." Dr. Carter smiled, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "Tell me about him." As Ethan talked about Buddy, his voice filled with love and excitement, Dr. Carter felt a familiar warmth in his chest. It was the same warmth he had felt when he first saw Max and Lily together, a reminder of the power of love and connection. When Ethan finished his story, Dr. Carter reached into his pocket and pulled out a small stuffed dog, its fur a soft golden brown. "This is for you," he said, handing the toy to Ethan. "I know it's not the same as having Buddy here, but maybe it can keep you company until you're back home with him." Ethan's eyes widened with delight as he took the stuffed dog, hugging it tightly. "Thank you, Dr. Carter," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. The garden also became a place where Dr. Carter could reflect on his own life and the choices he had made. He thought about his childhood, about the golden retriever named Buddy who had been his constant companion, and about the lessons his parents had taught him about kindness and compassion. He thought about the long hours he spent at the hospital, the sacrifices he had made for his career, and the relationships he had let fall by the wayside. One evening, as he sat on the bench by the pond, Dr. Carter pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in far too long. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Michael, is that you?" "Hi, Mom," Dr. Carter said, his voice soft. "Yeah, it's me. I wanted to call and say hi, and to tell you that I love you." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then his mother's voice filled with emotion. "I love you too, sweetheart. It's so good to hear your voice." As they talked, Dr. Carter felt a sense of peace settle over him. Max's story had reminded him of the importance of connection, of cherishing the people and the pets who mattered most. And as he sat there, surrounded by the beauty of the garden, he made a promise to himself to live with more compassion, to cherish the moments that mattered, and to never take love for granted. The garden continued to be a source of inspiration for Dr. Carter, a place where he could reflect on the lessons Max had taught him and find the strength to keep going. And as he walked through the hospital corridors, his steps a little lighter and his heart a little fuller, he knew that Max's legacy would live on, not just in the garden, but in the lives of everyone he had touched. For Dr. Carter, Max was more than just a dog. He was a reminder of the power of love, the resilience of the human spirit, and the importance of never giving up, even in the face of the greatest challenges. And as he looked out at the garden, its flowers blooming in the soft light of the evening, he felt a sense of gratitude for the little dog who had changed his life in ways he could never have imagined. Max's story had become more than just a tale of a loyal dog and a grieving little girl. It had become a beacon of hope, a reminder of the profound connections that bind us all. As the years passed, the story of Max and Lily continued to inspire those who heard it, spreading far beyond the small town where it had begun. It was shared in newspapers, on social media, and even in books, touching the hearts of people around the world. Max, with his scruffy fur and soulful eyes, had become a symbol of love, loyalty, and resilience, a testament to the power of the human and canine spirit. For Lily, Max was more than just a symbol. He was her best friend, her constant companion, and a living link to her mother. As she grew older, she often found herself reflecting on the journey they had shared, from the dark days after the accident to the moments of joy and healing that had followed. Max had been there through it all, his unwavering presence a source of comfort and strength. One sunny afternoon, as Lily sat in the memorial garden with Max by her side, she thought about how far they had come. The garden had become a special place for her, a sanctuary where she could feel close to her mom. The plaque at the entrance, with its picture of Sarah, Lily, and Max, was a constant reminder of the love that had brought them all together. Lily ran her fingers through Max's fur, her mind drifting back to the day they had been reunited. She could still remember the way he had bounded toward her, his tail wagging furiously, and the way he had licked her face as she hugged him tightly. It had been a moment of pure joy, a glimmer of light in the darkness of her grief. "You've been my rock, Max," Lily whispered, her voice soft. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Max looked up at her, his big, soulful eyes filled with love and understanding. He nuzzled her hand, his tail thumping softly against the ground, as if to remind her that he would always be there for her. As Lily grew older, she began to share Max's story with others, hoping to inspire them the way it had inspired her. She spoke at school events, community gatherings, and even on a local radio show, her voice filled with emotion as she recounted the journey she and Max had shared. People were moved by her words, by the love and resilience that shone through her story. One day, Lily received a letter from a woman who had heard her speak on the radio. The woman's husband had recently passed away, and she had been struggling to cope with her grief. But hearing Lily's story had given her hope, a reminder that love could endure even in the face of loss. "Your story touched my heart," the woman wrote. "It reminded me that even in the darkest times, there is still light. Thank you for sharing your journey with the world." Lily read the letter aloud to Max, her voice trembling with emotion. "See, Max?" she said, her eyes shining with tears. "You're helping people even when you don't realize it." Max wagged his tail, his eyes filled with love, as if he understood the impact he had made. Max's legacy extended beyond the community, inspiring people in ways Lily could never have imagined. A children's book was written about Max and Lily, its pages filled with colorful illustrations and heartfelt words. The book became a bestseller, its message of love and resilience resonating with readers of all ages. Schools and libraries hosted readings, and children everywhere fell in love with the story of the scruffy little dog who had waited so patiently for his family. Lily and Max were invited to book signings and events, where they met people whose lives had been touched by their story. One little girl, who had lost her father in a car accident, clung to Lily's hand as she told her how much the book had helped her feel less alone. "Max reminds me of my dog," the girl said, her voice soft. "He's always there for me, just like Max is for you." Lily knelt down, her eyes meeting the girl's. "That's what Max taught me," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "That love never really goes away. It's always there, in the people and the pets we hold dear." As the years passed, Max grew older, his once boundless energy giving way to a slower, more gentle pace. His fur turned gray around the edges, and he spent more time napping in the sun than chasing after toys. But his love for Lily never wavered, his eyes still filled with the same adoration they had held when she was a little girl. Lily, now a teenager, cherished every moment she had with Max. She knew that their time together was precious, and she was determined to make the most of it. They still visited the memorial garden often, sitting on the bench by the pond and reflecting on the journey they had shared. Lily would tell Max stories about her mom, her voice soft and filled with love, and Max would listen intently, his tail wagging gently. One evening, as they sat in the garden, Lily noticed that Max seemed more tired than usual. He rested his head on her lap, his breathing slow and steady, as if he were savoring the moment. Lily ran her fingers through his fur, her heart aching with love and gratitude. "You've been my best friend, Max," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know what I'll do without you." Max looked up at her, his eyes filled with love and understanding. He nuzzled her hand, his tail thumping softly against the ground, as if to remind her that he would always be with her, even if he couldn't be by her side. Max's legacy lived on, not just in the stories and books, but in the hearts of everyone he had touched. For Lily, he was a reminder of the love and resilience that had carried her through the darkest days of her life. For the community, he was a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of love and loyalty. And for Dr. Carter, he was a reminder of the lessons he had learned about compassion, connection, and the importance of never giving up. As the sun set over the garden, casting a golden glow over the flowers in the pond, Lily felt a sense of peace settle over her. She knew that Max's time with her was drawing to a close, but she also knew that his love would never fade. It would live on in her heart, in the stories she shared, and in the lives of everyone who had been touched by his story. "Thank you, Max," Lily whispered, her voice filled with love, "for everything." Max wagged his tail, his eyes filled with love, as if to say, "I'll always be with you." The years had been kind to Max, but time, as it always does, had taken its toll. His once scruffy brown and white fur had turned mostly gray, and his steps had grown slower, more deliberate. Yet his eyes still held the same warmth and love they always had, and his tail still wagged with joy whenever Lily walked into the room. He had been her constant companion, her rock, her best friend, and now, as he lay peacefully on his favorite blanket in the living room, Lily knew that their time together was coming to an end. It was a quiet evening, the kind of evening that felt heavy with emotion. Lily sat on the floor beside Max, her hand resting gently on his side, feeling the slow rise and fall of his breathing. Her grandparents, Margaret and Thomas, sat nearby, their faces filled with sadness, but also gratitude for the years they had shared with the loyal little dog who had brought so much light into their lives. "It's okay, Max," Lily whispered, her voice trembling. "You can rest now. You've done so much for all of us. You've been the best friend anyone could ever ask for." Max looked up at her, his big soulful eyes filled with love and understanding. He let out a soft whine, his tail thumping weakly against the floor, as if to tell her that he loved her too. Lily's tears fell freely now, her heart breaking as she stroked his fur one last time. "Thank you, Max," she said, her voice breaking, "for everything, for being there for me when I needed you most, for helping me remember Mom, for loving me so much." Max's breathing slowed, his eyes never leaving Lily's face, and then, with a final contented sigh, he closed his eyes and drifted away. The room was silent, the weight of the moment settling over them like a heavy blanket. Lily buried her face in Max's fur, her sobs muffled as she held him close. Margaret and Thomas knelt beside her, their arms wrapping around her in a tight embrace. They cried together, their tears mingling as they mourned the loss of the little dog who had been such an important part of their family. The days that followed were difficult, the house feeling emptier without Max's presence. Lily found herself looking for him in all the familiar places. By the front door, where he used to wait for her. On the couch, where he would curl up beside her. And in the backyard, where he would chase after squirrels with boundless energy. The silence was deafening, a stark reminder of the void he had left behind. But even in her grief, Lily found solace in the memories they had shared. She would sit by the window, flipping through old photo albums filled with pictures of Max. Max as a puppy, his ears flopping as he ran through the grass. Max sitting proudly beside Lily on her first day of school. Max lying in the sun, his tongue lolling out as he napped. Each picture brought a fresh wave of tears, but also a sense of gratitude for the time they had had together. One afternoon, as Lily sat in the memorial garden at the hospital, she found herself reflecting on Max's legacy. The garden had always been a special place for her, a sanctuary where she could feel close to her mom and Max. The plaque at the entrance, with its picture of Sarah, Lily, and Max, was a constant reminder of the love that had brought them all together. As she sat there, her fingers tracing the words on the plaque, "Love knows no bounds, not even death," Lily felt a sense of peace settle over her. Max had taught her so much about love, loyalty, and resilience, and she knew that his legacy would live on, not just in her heart, but in the lives of everyone he had touched. A few weeks after Max's passing, Lily decided to honor his memory in a way that felt fitting. She approached Dr. Carter with an idea to plant a tree in the hospital garden in Max's honor. Dr. Carter, who had become like family to Lily and her grandparents over the years, immediately agreed. "It's a beautiful idea, Lily," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Max brought so much love and light into this world. A tree will be a living reminder of his legacy." The tree planting ceremony was held on a sunny afternoon, with members of the community, hospital staff, and Lily's friends and family in attendance. The tree, a young oak, was planted near the pond, its branches reaching toward the sky as if embracing the sun. A small plaque was placed at its base, with the words, "In loving memory of Max, a loyal friend, a symbol of hope, and a reminder that love endures." As Lily stood beside the tree, her hand resting on its trunk, she felt a sense of peace and gratitude. The tree was more than just a memorial. It was a symbol of the love and resilience that Max had embodied. It was a reminder that even in the face of loss, there was still hope, still beauty, still love. "Thank you, Max," Lily whispered, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "For everything. I'll never forget you." In the months and years that followed, the tree grew tall and strong, its branches spreading wide to provide shade and shelter. Patients and staff would often sit beneath it, finding solace and peace in its presence. Children would play around its base, their laughter echoing through the garden, and Lily would visit often, sitting on the bench nearby and reflecting on the journey she and Max had shared. The tree became a symbol of Max's legacy, a living reminder of the love and loyalty that had touched so many lives. And as Lily grew older, she found comfort in knowing that Max's spirit would always be with her, in the rustle of the leaves, in the warmth of the sun, and in the love that would never fade. The hospital garden had become a sanctuary for Lily, a place where she could find peace and solace amidst the chaos of life. Now a young woman, she often found herself drawn to the quiet corner of the grounds, where the oak tree she had planted in Max's honor stood tall and strong. Its branches stretched toward the sky, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze, and its roots ran deep, a symbol of the love and resilience that had carried her through the darkest days of her life. Lily sat on the bench beneath the tree, her fingers tracing the words on the plaque at its base. In loving memory of Max, a loyal friend, a symbol of hope, and a reminder that love endures. The words brought a smile to her face, even as tears welled up in her eyes. Max had been gone for years now, but his presence was still felt in every corner of the garden, in every memory she held close to her heart. As she sat there lost in thought, Lily reflected on the lessons Max had taught her. He had shown her the power of love, the strength of loyalty, and the importance of resilience. He had been her rock, her constant companion, and her best friend, and his legacy lived on in the stories she shared and the lives he had touched. One sunny afternoon, as Lily sat beneath the tree, she noticed a familiar figure walking toward her. It was Dr. Carter, his hair now streaked with gray, but his smile as warm as ever. He had retired from the hospital a few years ago, but he still visited the garden often, finding comfort and peace in its beauty. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice gentle. Lily smiled and scooted over to make room for him on the bench. "Of course not. It's good to see you, Dr. Carter." "It's good to see you too, Lily," he said, sitting down beside her. "How have you been?" Lily sighed, her gaze drifting to the tree. "I've been okay. Some days are harder than others, but coming here helps. It's like, it's like I can still feel Max's presence, you know?" Dr. Carter nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "I know exactly what you mean. This garden has always been a special place, but since you planted this tree, it's become even more so. Max's spirit is everywhere here." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the rustling of the leaves overhead. Then Dr. Carter spoke again, his voice soft. "Do you remember the first time you and Max came here after he was reunited with you?" Lily smiled, her eyes shining with tears. "How could I forget? He was so happy, wagging his tail and sniffing everything. It was like he knew this was a place where he belonged." "He did belong here," Dr. Carter said, "just like you do. This garden is a testament to the love and resilience that you and Max shared. It's a reminder that even in the face of loss, there is still hope, still beauty, still love." As they talked, Lily and Dr. Carter shared stories of Max, their laughter mingling with their tears. Lily told him about the time Max had chased a squirrel up a tree and gotten stuck, his barks of frustration echoing through the backyard. Dr. Carter recounted the day he had first seen Max outside the hospital, his eyes fixed on the sliding glass doors as if waiting for Sarah to return. "He was such a special dog," Dr. Carter said, his voice filled with emotion. "He taught me so much about love and loyalty, and he brought so much light into the lives of everyone he touched." Lily nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "He did. He was my best friend, and I'll always be grateful for the time we had together." Dr. Carter reached over and placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes filled with warmth. "And he'll always be with you, Lily, in your heart, in your memories, and in this garden." The garden had become more than just a memorial for Sarah and Max. It had become a place of healing and hope for everyone who visited. Patients and staff would often sit beneath the oak tree, finding solace and peace in its shade. Children would play around its base, their laughter echoing through the garden, and families would gather on the benches, sharing stories and memories of their loved ones. For Lily, the garden was a reminder of the love that had carried her through the darkest days of her life. It was a place where she could feel close to her mom and Max, a place where she could find comfort and strength. And as she sat there with Dr. Carter, sharing stories and memories, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the garden, Lily and Dr. Carter stood up to leave. They walked slowly along the winding path, their footsteps soft against the gravel. When they reached the entrance, Lily paused, her gaze drifting to the plaque with the picture of Sarah, Lily, and Max. "Thank you, Dr. Carter," she said, her voice soft but filled with emotion, "for everything, for helping me find Max, for being there for me, and for reminding me that love endures." Dr. Carter smiled, his eyes shining with tears. "Thank you, Lily, for sharing your story, for reminding me of the power of love, and for being such an inspiration to everyone who knows you. They hugged, their tears mingling as they held each other close. And as they walked out of the garden, the words on the plaque seemed to glow in the fading light. Love knows no bounds, not even death. The garden continued to bloom, its flowers a vibrant testament to the love that had inspired its creation. And in the hearts of everyone who visited, the story of Max and Lily lived on, a reminder that love truly knows no bounds, not even death. For Lily, the garden was more than just a memorial. It was a place of healing and hope, a testament to the enduring power of love. And as she walked away, her heart filled with gratitude, she knew that Max's legacy would live on, not just in the garden, but in the lives of everyone he had touched.